Millionaire lets his daughter pick a new mom. No one expected her to choose the black maid. When millionaire Richard Weston lost his wife, his mansion grew silent, except for the laughter of his little girl, Lily, who was too young to understand what forever gone meant. 1 year later, Richard decided it was time to move on. He invited 5 elegant, wealthy women to his estate, each perfect, each powerful. But he never imagined that the person his daughter would choose as her new mother wasn't among them. Not even close, because the person Lily pointed to that day wasn't a guest. She was the woman who cleaned their floors. And her choice would change every life in that house forever. The Weston estate was a symbol of wealth. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, and silence that echoed louder than joy. Richard Weston, a respected businessman, had everything money could buy. Everything. Except peace. Since his wife's death, he'd buried himself in work, leaving his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, in the care of the household staff. Among them was Amara, the housekeeper, quiet, patient, always smiling through exhaustion. She wasn't hired for warmth. She was employed for efficiency. But somehow, Amara had become the heartbeat of the lonely home. While others saw a maid, Lily saw a friend, someone who knelt to tie her shoes, brushed her hair before bedtime, and told her stories about hope and kindness. What Amara didn't know was that these small moments were healing a wound deeper than she could imagine. One morning, Richard gathered his staff and made an announcement. "It's time Lily had a mother again," he said firmly. 5 incredible women will be visiting us this weekend, each successful. Each is capable of giving Lily a proper life. Whispers filled the house. The maids exchanged glances. Some smiled politely and others didn't dare to. Amara just nodded, quietly continuing her work. She knew her place, but Lily's little mind was already racing. "A new mom?" she whispered to herself. And as she looked at the polished marble floors, her eyes stopped on the reflection of the woman who had never treated her like a task, but like a child. That weekend arrived like a storm wrapped in perfume and luxury. 5 women, draped in jewels and silk, stepped out of black cars and into the Weston mansion. Cameras flashed as the press caught whispers of the billionaire's search for love. But inside, the real story was far more complex. Each woman seemed to perform, laughter too loud, compliments too polished. They praised the house, the art, and especially Richard's wealth. But none noticed the quiet little girl watching from the staircase, clutching her teddy bear. Lily saw through the smiles. She noticed how one woman frowned when Amara served her tea, how another complained about the smell of cleaning products. She saw how Amara apologized softly, bowing her head, only to return moments later with a fresh tray, still smiling. It wasn't just work for her. It was dignity. At dinner, the women took turns impressing Richard. They spoke of charities, art, and influence, but their kindness ended where status began. When Amara accidentally dropped a spoon near one of them, the table fell silent. One woman smirked. "Careful," she said, her tone dripping with judgment. "You wouldn't want to stain your uniform on these expensive floors." Laughter followed, polite, cruel laughter. Richard chuckled weakly, trying to diffuse the moment. But Lily's eyes widened in confusion. Why were they laughing at Amara? She hadn't done anything wrong. That night, when everyone had gone to bed, Lily wandered into the kitchen where she found Amara washing dishes. "Do people always talk to you like that?" she asked softly. Amara froze for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Sometimes, little one, but kindness isn't something we wait to receive. It's something we give, even when others forget how." Lily didn't understand all the words, but she felt their warmth. That night, she decided something in her heart, something she didn't tell anyone. The next day, Richard gathered the guests and staff in the garden. The final decision, he said, would be made by Lily herself. The women lined up, radiant in their gowns, red, green, blue, black, and gold, each confident that a child would choose the prettiest dress. But when Richard turned to his daughter and said, "Lily, who do you want to be your new mommy?" the world seemed to stop. because Lily didn't look at the guests. She turned toward the servants' line and raised her small finger, pointing straight at Amara. For a few seconds, no one breathed. The air was heavy, stunned. The 5 elegant women looked at one another in disbelief, some offended, others pitying. Richard blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Lily," he said carefully, that's Amara. She works here." "I know," Lily said with quiet certainty. "She's already been my mom." Whispers rippled through the crowd. One of the guests laughed, muttering something about children not knowing better. Another crossed her arms and said, "Surely, Mr. Weston, this is adorable but unrealistic." But Amara's eyes were wide, not with hope, but with fear. She wanted to speak, to tell Lily that such a thing could never happen, that the world didn't allow women like her to belong in rooms like this. But her lips trembled, and no words came. Richard's mind spun. He had built his empire on control, precision, and reputation. What would people say if he even entertained this? A millionaire marrying his maid? It was unthinkable. Yet as he looked at Lily, standing proudly beside Amara, something inside him cracked open. He saw what his daughter saw. Not status, not appearance, but heart. Amara had done what money couldn't. She had brought joy back into his home. The guests waited for his reaction. Cameras from the press lingered beyond the gates. And then Richard did something no one expected. He walked toward Amara, his footsteps echoing on the marble path, and said quietly, "You've cared for us when you didn't have to. You've healed my daughter in ways I couldn't. Maybe you're the one we both needed." The women in gowns stood frozen, their practiced smiles fading. Amara's eyes filled with tears, not from victory, but from disbelief that kindness had finally been seen as worth. News of the event spread like wildfire. The tabloids wrote their twisted headlines. "Millionaire marries his maid. A child's choice shocks high society." But behind the noise, something quieter and far more meaningful was happening. Richard and Amara didn't rush into romance. It began with respect, with acknowledgement. He offered her not pity, but partnership. He raised her pay, gave her freedom, and treated her like family before calling her one. Lily's world changed most of all. She no longer woke to cold breakfasts or empty rooms. She woke to laughter, warmth, and stories told by a woman who had once been invisible in her own home. But the whispers never stopped. At galas, Richard was asked if he felt charitable. At meetings, colleagues joked about his unusual taste. Every racist comment came disguised as social concern, polite prejudice hidden under polished words. Yet, each time, Richard simply smiled and said, "You should see what real love looks like when it's not wearing a price tag." Amara, meanwhile, never forgot where she came from. She continued to volunteer at shelters, mentoring young women who had been told they'd never belong anywhere beyond service jobs. "You belong wherever your kindness takes you," she would say. Years later, Lily, now grown, would write a book titled "The Maid Who Became My Mother." It wouldn't be about wealth or marriage. It would be about humanity, about the quiet courage of those who love even when the world tells them they're not allowed to. And perhaps that's what this story honestly reminds us. Love doesn't ask what color your skin is. It asks what kind of heart you have, because sometimes the richest choice isn't found in gold or status. It's found in the heart of someone the world never thought mattered. Millionaire lets his daughter pick a new mom. No one expected her to choose the black maid. A choice that changed everything, not just for a family, but for everyone who ever judged love by its appearance.